November 25th, 2025. It's year 4, day 275. Since the full-scale invasion began, welcome to the Daily Situation Report. Above all, I welcome the channel members, subscribers, and the Algo crew. It's been 4 days since the last report. Unfortunately, I was absent and visiting the federal capital to meet with many great and honorable people. Above all, to bring the aid that we were able to finance through various fundraising campaigns to where it is needed most. Let's see how today's report is received. Looks like the Algo crew will have to leave a few extra comments and likes so the algorithm doesn't punish the 4-day break too much. What I experienced in Berlin and what I saw at the charity shop of Ukraine Aid Berlin, because it's really worth visiting, and I'll show you that this week in a special video. So stay tuned. Today's report includes a summary of the most important events of the past few days. According to consistent reports, the Shatura thermal power plant in the Moscow region was attacked by drones. Recordings show several explosions and large-scale fires. Initial indications suggest that peripheral facilities were hit. Typical targets there are outer fields, transformers, switchgear, and oil and gas supply units, because a single hit can often cause follow-on effects for other facilities as well. Russia's air defense has done an amazing job again in the past few days. Every shot a hit, only that once again, residential buildings of their own population were hit instead of the targets in the air. This video here is from the Belgorod region. This other video was filmed in Crimea. As you can see from all the tracer rounds wildly flying in every direction, the Russians absolutely don't care that by shooting like crazy, they could hit any other house, any car, and even worse, any of their own civilians. This video here is from Galechnik. The Ukrainians attacked there with drones and the Russians responded with their air defense. So you see, it's still going on. I don't know any other country that uses missiles to shoot down low-flying targets over its own residential areas, or at least tries to. According to several reports, during the nightly strikes on the Russian airbase Taganrog, a rare A-60 and an Ilyushin 76 were damaged or even destroyed. There were only 2 A-60s so far, since both prototypes date back to the Soviet era and have hardly been developed further since then. The Ilyushin 76. That one should be well known, as it forms the backbone of Russian air logistics. With the A-60, you're not quite so sure either. It could also be, because of the structure back there, one of the predecessor versions of the A-100, so one of the test aircraft. Please wait a bit longer until we have more information, as this is still new. Russian soldiers are committing war crimes again. In this video, 4 Ukrainian soldiers are lying on the ground with their hands over the edge. Why is this happening? Why isn't the shooter afraid of consequences when he commits such an act? Because there aren't any serious ones? And that's a problem. From the Russian point of view, it is completely irrelevant whether such executions are recorded by the Ukrainians with drones or not. Quite the opposite. Often they record these things themselves and then publish them on the internet. There is actually no one on either side who does anything about it or says anything against it. The Ukrainians do condemn it and want to punish it afterwards. But the Russian soldiers don't care about that, since they assume they'll win the war eventually anyway. Who would want to stop them? The first draft of the 28-point plan, which would have granted full amnesty, clearly showed that the United States also has no interest in investigating and punishing such crimes further. And Europe, as always, keeps quiet and thinks about how a few more tankers can be sanctioned, which then get a new name at the next port and continue sailing under a new flag, while the truly painful sanctions once again fail to materialize or are simply imposed at much too long intervals. So who is actually going to seriously punish them or put a stop to them? Russia doesn't care. They don't care about Ukraine, and the West is once again a hostage to itself and does nothing at all. And that's not just about this, but almost every topic too. Now, once again, the news is asking the same question that I've heard almost 100 times in a row, unchanged, and always with the same enthusiasm. Will Russia now come to the negotiating table, and will there be peace then? Or will peace come closer? I can't take this anymore. After 1,371 days of the full-scale invasion, it's finally time for the West to realize that this is a real war and not a diplomatic act. Russia will not and will never be willing to back down from any demands as long as they continue to make gains in Ukraine. Even if it's only a few meters gained daily at great cost, it's still not enough for the Kremlin. Russia will never respond to reason, and Russia will never negotiate with the European Union. The only thing they want is to negotiate on equal footing with the United States of America, and then in this case, to emerge as the winners of the war. And they will succeed in that. I'm convinced of it, unless Europe finally stands together united and in solidarity, or unanimous decisions continue to be a problem for quick action. It's time to finally increase the pressure. That means giving strong military support to Ukraine, which is already defending well against what was once the world's second most powerful army. We still see that here, otherwise Ukraine would have fallen after 3 days. But instead of that happening, after 1,771 days, we still see that the Russians have barely made any progress in the last 2 years, and that's despite tough conditions. So we should make sure to show the Kremlin and Putin that it can get even harder, almost impossible, to achieve any gains, and then only then will he be ready to negotiate in any way. But there's definitely no need for negotiation here. Subscribe if you haven't already. Support the channel. Just like I inform you every day, quickly and reliably, without a lot of chatter, self-promotion, or ads in the reports. In the city of Minarad, 4 Russian soldiers were captured as resources. This happened roughly in the middle here, around the green pin. Unlike the 4 Ukrainian soldiers from earlier, they were not executed on the spot. That's why I placed the gray zone a bit further inside the city, regardless of the direction they probably came from, in this case, the east. Just a few kilometers away near Pokrovsk, situations also differ. There are people who claim that Ukraine has managed to drive the Russians out of the city center, and now they're trying to bring the train station back under their control. Then there are people who claim the exact opposite and want to show that the pocket has long been physically closed and the Ukrainians are encircled. Some people seem like they were tossed in the air 3 times as babies, but only caught twice. What do these 3 statements show us? None of them reflect the current situation, especially not the statement about the NATO soldiers. How do people come up with such nonsense? And why do they support such nonsense? I'll explain the situation near Pokrovsk using reputable, reliable sources from both sides and geolocations. No cheering, no victory or hopeful messages. Longtime viewers already know this. On my situation map, the red areas actually mean that they are controlled by the Russians. The blue areas show where Ukrainians recaptured territory. And the yellow areas here, for example, mean that it's a gray zone where things are unclear. The only exception is here in the area north of Pokrovsk and in the area south around Pokrovsk. There, red means that it is mostly Russian-dominated, and yellow means that it is heavily contested by both sides. And you don't know who really dominates here. What is the difference between conquered, occupied, and dominated? Well, with conquered and occupied, we know that there won't be any soldiers from the opposing side standing there anymore. But here, it's still unclear. It could still be, right? I'm still receiving geolocations of Ukrainian soldiers here, where Russian drones sometimes strike too, which wouldn't make any sense if there were only Russians in there. That means these areas here are mostly dominated by the Russians. But it's also possible that there are still Ukrainian soldiers there. Both sides have the same yellow areas, and everywhere unmarked, Ukrainians are the majority or have the upper hand. And, as I said, everywhere else, you can say with certainty on the map that there are no enemy soldiers there, whereas with Pokrovsk, we don't have that luxury. Unlike before, Russians are now able to attack here and heavy fighting is occurring in this district. They once reached these areas. Ukrainian drones attacked isolated Russian soldiers here. No major advance, it was just 2 or 3 soldiers walking around in a field. Unfortunately, I can't show the video here, but I upload almost everything to Telegram. But things aren't the same here in Pokrovsk as they used to be anyway. Don't compare this to Bakhmut. In Bakhmut, we saw a lot of Russian soldiers behind the city, many columns, many attacks, many attack routes. We saw a lot of groups, companies that attacked in a single strike. That's not the case anymore. Today it's 2 or 3 soldiers trying to capture a house. If they fail, nothing changes. If they succeed, they stay in and 2 or 3 more soldiers move up. And the first ones then move forward another few hundred meters, and that's how it goes back and forth. These are no longer large groups or big units fighting here. These are actually more or less small groups against small groups. And it works for the Russians too, we can see that. Otherwise, they wouldn't gain any territory here. However, they're not as exaggerated as on some pro-Russian maps. On the other hand, the Ukrainians also aren't able to contain everything happening here, like it was shown from the beginning on the very pro-Ukrainian map. In the end, fighting is still going on here. You could say that about 80% of the city is more or less under Russian control. Heavy fighting continues here, and this area could soon be lost. As I mentioned, the Russians are launching a new attack here, with additional attacks also being reported. A bit further east, near Myrnarath again, I marked the spot here in yellow. The Russians launched heavy attacks here, but haven't officially captured these places. That occurred. On the Russian side, there was no report, but there was hardly anything left that they were holding the places. That's why it's a difficult gray area to assess. And the attacks that took place here on Myrnarath came exclusively from the east. That means you couldn't even say that they attacked from the south, which would make it clear to us that they had already broken through somewhere here. That's why, as I said, all of this is a big gray area. The Russians are advancing from all sides, but we don't know their positions or where Ukrainians have retreated. Up on the road here, there were more Russian drone attacks there. That means the Russians have reached so far north of the city that they can launch attacks from there with drone operators. Ukrainian vehicles traveled along the T-0515 here. 2 were destroyed at the red pin. But in the semicircle, they continue to increase the pressure. We've already seen that. The prices for Chinese export goods to Russia have increased by 87% in the last 12 months. The source for this is NTV. In comparison, prices in the West have only increased by 9% during the same period. If you compare this with the extremely low energy prices that China pays for Russian energy, it becomes clear that Beijing absolutely benefits from this unequal relationship. This extreme ripoff is happening on the backs of Russian citizens who are already struggling. At the same time, many of them also support the war, which continues to burden them more and more in this area. It's incredibly unfortunate and also sad to see how Russia is harming itself and how the citizens are dealing with it. Unfortunate and sad how Russia is harming itself and are dealing with it. Is incredibly sad. Russia itself. Dealing with is incredibly sad. Seeing how Russia is harming itself. It's incredibly unfortunate and also sad to see how Russia is harming itself and how the citizens are keeping themselves busy. Seeing how Russia is harming itself and keeping busy is incredibly unfortunate and sad to see how Russia is harming itself and how they are keeping busy.